Hi there, and welcome to Ku English. In this series, we explore the lives of amazing people and help you improve your English at the same time. Ready? Let's dive in. Warren McCulloch, Where a Mind Was Formed. Chapter 1. A Child Between Faith and Restlessness. Warren Sturgis McCulloch was born on November 16, 1898, in Orange, New Jersey, at a time when America was changing rapidly but still carried the heavy breath of the 19th century. His family stood firmly within the educated middle class. His father, a physician, believed in discipline and order. His mother, thoughtful and intellectually inclined, carried within her the quiet seriousness of New England Protestant culture. Their home was not loud, but it was filled with expectation. Books lined the shelves. Conversations at the dinner table were careful and structured. Religion was not a decoration, it was a framework. Young Warren grew up hearing the language of duty, morality, and reason long before he fully understood their weight. His early environment did not lack affection, but it lacked ease. The world was something to be studied, not simply enjoyed. As a child, he was curious in a way that unsettled adults. He asked questions that did not end. If told that God created the world, he wanted to know how creation occurred. If told that the brain was an organ, he asked how thoughts could arise from flesh. His teachers noticed his intensity early. He read faster than his classmates and often wandered mentally into subjects far beyond the classroom. Yet he was not entirely at home among other children. He was tall, somewhat awkward, and prone to long silences. He felt the tension between belonging and standing apart. While other boys played easily, Warren often watched. He preferred stories, especially stories told aloud. English literature, with its rhythm and drama, captivated him. Words were not merely symbols, they were living structures. He would later speak about language as if it were architecture. The Protestant seriousness of his upbringing pressed heavily on him. Sin, responsibility, and salvation were not abstract ideas, but part of daily vocabulary. He felt the moral gravity of life from an early age. At times, it gave him direction. At other times, it created inner conflict. He was a child who sensed that thought itself might carry moral consequences. America, at the turn of the century, believed strongly in progress. Science was beginning to promise answers to mysteries once left to religion. Electricity lit cities. Railroads connected distant states. Medical science advanced steadily, and yet in Warren's childhood home, faith and rationality coexisted uneasily. His father respected science. His culture respected scripture. This dual inheritance shaped him profoundly. He learned to read scripture with attention to structure and argument. At the same time, he watched his father examine patients using medical reasoning. The question began to form in him, slowly, quietly. Could the human mind be understood as precisely as the human body? His early schooling was marked by discipline and high standards. He did well academically, though not always in predictable ways. Teachers admired his intellect but found him intense, sometimes difficult. He resisted easy answers. If a lesson lacked depth, he grew restless. If a rule lacked logic, he questioned it. In adolescence, loneliness deepened into something more reflective. He began keeping notebooks. Not diaries of feelings, but notebooks of ideas. Questions about consciousness, about morality, about logic. He was not yet a scientist. He was not yet a philosopher. But the seed had been planted, the belief that thought itself could be examined. The social world around him was orderly and structured, but inside he carried turbulence. He wanted certainty, yet doubted simple claims. He wanted faith, yet demanded explanation. The tension between these desires would follow him for decades. By the time he finished secondary school, those around him expected him to choose a respectable path, medicine, perhaps law, certainly something stable. Yet the deeper question had already taken hold. What is the mind? Is it spirit? Is it matter? Or is it something that connects the two? He did not yet know that this question would define his life. But the boy who listened carefully to English stories, who felt both faith and doubt, had already begun his journey. The world was changing, and so was he. Chapter 2. The Education of Doubt. When Warren McCulloch entered Yale University in 1917, he stepped into a world of intellectual confidence. Universities in America were expanding rapidly. Science was gaining authority. Philosophy departments debated logic, language, and the foundations of knowledge with seriousness and ambition. At Yale, McCulloch studied philosophy. This choice surprised some who expected him to pursue medicine immediately. Yet for him, philosophy felt necessary. Before understanding the brain, he wanted to understand thought. Before studying neurons, he wanted to examine logic. He immersed himself in Aristotle, Kant, and the emerging currents of modern logic. The discipline of reasoning attracted him deeply. He admired structure, the careful arrangement of premises and conclusions. Logic seemed to offer a way to move from uncertainty toward clarity. But clarity did not come easily. He found himself increasingly troubled by the gap between philosophy and lived experience. The philosophers argued about categories and forms, yet the human brain, this physical organ, remained mysterious. Could pure reasoning ever fully explain consciousness? He began to attend lectures beyond his department: biology, physiology, psychology. These subjects drew his attention. He sensed that philosophy alone could not answer the questions that haunted him, nor could theology, though its language still lingered in his thoughts. During these years, he struggled inwardly. He admired intellectual systems, but distrusted dogma. He respected religious tradition, but questioned literal belief. At times, he felt suspended between worlds, no longer fully committed to faith, not yet fully confident in science. This tension did not weaken him, it sharpened him. After Yale, he pursued further studies in psychology and neurophysiology. He moved through institutions that would shape his thinking profoundly, including Columbia University and later medical training. The decision to enter medicine was not merely practical, it represented a turning point. If the mind emerged from the brain, then the brain must be studied directly. Medical training exposed him to the physical reality of human life. Brains were no longer abstract subjects of discussion. They were anatomical structures, vulnerable and complex. He witnessed injury, disease, and mental disturbance. Patients suffering from epilepsy or trauma revealed how fragile thought could be. This was no longer philosophy in a lecture hall. It was life observed in hospital wards. He began to see that the boundary between body and mind was thinner than he had once imagined. A small lesion in the cortex could alter personality. Electrical activity in neurons could trigger movement or memory. The idea slowly formed. Perhaps thought itself could be described in terms of neural activity. Yet doubts persisted. Could something as rich as imagination be reduced to electrical signals? Would such a reduction erase meaning? Or would it reveal a deeper structure? He was not a man who feared complexity. He was drawn toward it. During these years, he also developed a reputation for intellectual boldness. He did not hesitate to challenge professors. He asked uncomfortable questions. Some admired his courage. Others found him difficult. He was not interested in polite agreement. He wanted coherence. His early academic path was not smooth. There were moments of uncertainty, of financial strain, of intellectual isolation. He changed directions more than once, searching for a discipline that could hold both logic and life. In quiet evenings, he continued writing notes, sketching ideas about how neurons might function logically. The thought was radical for its time. Most scientists studied the brain biologically, not mathematically. But McCulloch sensed that logic and biology might meet somewhere inside the nervous system. He did not yet have proof. He did not yet have collaborators who shared his vision. What he had was a growing conviction that the mind could be modeled, that its operations might follow rules, much like logic. The boy who once listened to English stories had become a young man who listened to electrical signals in his imagination. He was still searching, and the search was about to become more concrete. Chapter 3: Seeds of a New Language. By the late 1920s and early 1930s, Warren McCulloch had entered professional life as a neurophysiologist. He worked at institutions such as the University of Illinois College of Medicine and later the Illinois Neuropsychiatric Institute in Chicago. These were years of intense experimentation and observation. Chicago at that time was a city of industry and energy. Laboratories buzzed with new equipment. Scientists were mapping neural pathways, recording electrical impulses, and attempting to classify mental disorders. McCulloch found himself in an environment where science moved quickly, yet fundamental questions remained unanswered. He focused on understanding how neurons behaved. Individual nerve cells seemed simple. They either fired or they did not. They transmitted signals along fibers, yet, when combined in vast networks, they produced sensation, memory, language. The simplicity of the neuron fascinated him. He began imagining neurons not only as biological units but as logical ones. If a neuron fired only when certain inputs were present, could it be compared to a logical statement? If A and B occur, then C happens. The brain might be a system of conditions and consequences. This way of thinking was unusual. Many of his colleagues concentrated on clinical treatment or descriptive anatomy. McCulloch wanted abstraction. He wanted a formal language capable of describing neural activity precisely. At the same time, he remained aware of the human dimension. Working with psychiatric patients exposed him to suffering that could not be reduced easily to equations. Delusion, fear, hallucination, these experiences demanded compassion as well as analysis. He never entirely abandoned the philosophical depth that shaped his youth. It was during this period that he began to connect with thinkers outside traditional neuroscience. Mathematicians, logicians, engineers. He sought conversations beyond his immediate field. He believed that the mystery of the mind required interdisciplinary effort, though that word was not yet common. His personality was intense, sometimes overwhelming. He spoke rapidly, filled with associations and references. Students found him brilliant but difficult to follow, yet those who listened closely sensed that something new was forming. He carried inside him the memory of theological debates, philosophical arguments, and medical training. All these threads were weaving together. The Great Depression cast uncertainty over American institutions. Funding was unstable. Careers were fragile. Yet intellectual creativity often thrives in unstable times. McCulloch's ideas matured quietly, waiting for the right collaborator. He had not yet met Walter Pitts, the young mathematical prodigy who would transform his thinking. He had not yet written the paper that would help lay foundations for artificial neural networks. Recognition was still distant. But the essential elements were present. A childhood shaped by faith and doubt, an education in logic, medical immersion in the brain's physical reality, and an imagination capable of bridging disciplines. As the 1930s moved forward, the question that began in his youth, "What is the mind?" was narrowing into a more precise challenge. Can thought be expressed in mathematical form? The answer would not arrive immediately. It would require collaboration, struggle, and boldness, and it would change the course of modern science. Part 1 closes here with a man formed by tension between religion and reason, philosophy and physiology, abstraction and compassion. The seeds had been planted. In the next stage of his life, those seeds would awaken into ideas powerful enough to reshape how humanity understands intelligence. Thanks for learning with Ku English. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Until next time.